Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Azam, and in this video you're going to learn how to save an image into SQLite database using core data in a SwiftUI application. Let's go ahead and get started then. So first we will go ahead and create a core data model and set up the entities. I've already created a project, which is a SwiftUI project, and it's a pretty basic project. You can see there's nothing much going on over here. I'm going to go ahead and add a new file. And if you scroll down, you will see data model. So I'm just going to create a data model. And you can name this anything you want. I am simply going to call it the photos model. There we go. So this will be our core data model. Currently, you can see that we don't really have any entities. So we have to create entities, and those entities will be written, saved into the database. I'm going to use the Add Entity button to add a brand new entity. Let's go ahead and name this something different. So I'm just going to say photo. And this is just going to represent a single photo because we are going to save a single photo. Next, we will move our attention to the attributes. The name of the attribute. If you want the title, you can store the title also. If you want, that's perfectly fine. We're going to go ahead and set it as string. And we're also going to make sure that it is required. The next step is the actual image that we want to save. So I'm just going to say content. This will be the actual image. But one thing you will see is that there's no way to save an image. I mean, you can save a decimal, double, float, string, boolean, and all that stuff, but no images. You can use binary data to store an image. That's perfectly fine. Or you can use transformable, which means that we are going to save a particular type. When we're going to select transformable, we're going to make sure that the image is required. So let's go ahead and uncheck the optional. And now we have to decide that what kind of object are we storing there. Now, we can store any kind of object, but since we want to represent an image, we're just going to go ahead and say UI image. That's what we're trying to store. All right. Let's go ahead and build our application. Now, when I build the application, I immediately get an error. And if I click on the error, it will take us to the automatically generated file. This is generated by Xcode. And the problem is that we created our content property and we marked it as a UI image, as a transformable object. But UI image is contained in UIKit. If I try to add or import UIKit in this file, it's not going to work because this file is automatically generated and it will be overwritten the next time you build the app. So what will be the solution to this problem? Well, let's first go ahead and copy this code. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to create a new file. We will call it photo. Perfect. I'm just going to go ahead and paste the code. A couple of things I'm going to change about this. We're just going to go ahead and call it class. It will be using NSManageObject, which is another class, so it will be inheriting from that. And Objective-C, so that Objective-C for core data can see this. It will be photo. One thing we need to do again is to go back to the photos model, click on the entity, and then tell it that, hey, Xcode, don't bother automatically code generation for the class. We're just going to do it ourselves. So we're just going to go ahead and select manual or none. If I try to build the application right now, let's go ahead and see what's going on. It's going to complain that, again, UI image, but this time, since this is our own file, we can go ahead and add UIKit. And if I run it again, it's still giving us some problems. For this, the best solution is to go to Preferences, Locations, and then go ahead and delete Drive Data. After deleting derived data, let's go ahead and build the application again. And hopefully this time the application will be built successfully. Great. So now we have created our photo entity, photo class, which contains a content property, which is of UI image. We also have a photos model, which contains a transformable object, transformable property of type UI image. Everything is great. Perfect. The next thing we want to do is to actually set up the core data manager. That is going to allow us to set up the core data stack. So I'm just going to go ahead and add another file. I'll call it core data manager. We will go ahead and say class core data manager. Next, we are going to create a persistent container. This is going to allow us to set up core data stack. This is contained inside NS persistent container. We're also going to create a static property, a shared property for core data manager. Next, we're going to go ahead and create a private function, meaning the private initializer, and we're going to make sure that we are initializing persistent container. All right. Let's go ahead and make sure we're using the correct name, persistent container, not persistence container. Okay. So it looks like this core data manager is all set up and ready to go. The next thing that we want to do is to go to our content view and provide a very basic interface that can allow us to download an image and then save it into SQLite using core data. So I'm going to go ahead and create a button. I will call it download image. There we go. Now the question is, well, where should we download the image? Well, one of the places where you can go is pixum.photos. And you can see that there is a URL, and there are a bunch of URLs available that will allow you to download a random image. That's great. We can use that. We don't really want to make a call from right over here. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and create a photos view model. So let me go ahead and say photo view model. Photo view model. The photo view model will be responsible for everything that is happening on the photo screen. So we're going to start with photo view model, which will be of type observable object. We will start with also a download image function. And since we already have one URL, we can go ahead and construct a URL. We already have the URL. There we go. Now you might be wondering, wait, what are we doing over here and why are we adding an ID? That's not on their website. Well, when you add something, a query string at the end, a random query string at the end of the URL, that will allow us to get a unique image each time we invoke the URL. So that is why we're doing that. Next up, we are going to use the URL session to construct everything and download our data. We can use data task with the URL, passing in the URL. For the completion handler, we will get the data. Response, we can ignore. This is going to give us the data as well as the error. If the data is available and the response is nil, we're going to go ahead and unwrap the data. At this point, we should also be able to go ahead and create the content, basically the photo. So I'm going to go ahead and say photo equals to photo. But in order to create a photo entity, we need to pass in the context. At this point, we don't really have the context, so I'm just going to go ahead and get the context right over here. There we go, from the core data manager. Next, we have created our photo. Let's go ahead and give it some random title. It doesn't really matter what a title you're going to give. We're not even displaying the title. So I'm just going to say random photo. Great. And finally, the most important property of the photo entity is the content. And we can simply go ahead and say UI image, passing in the data and passing in the data, right? Next, we are going to simply go ahead and save it. So we can say context.save. This is going to update our photo, and now the content will be saved. Now, if I want to go ahead and make sure that the content is available on the UI, I can set it up to some sort of a publish property. Let's go ahead and also import a couple of different things, which is UIKit. That will allow us to do that. And we are also going to make sure that we are importing core data so that we can use those features also. Let's see what's going on over here. It's persistent container and not persistence container. Let's go ahead and pass in the context. Let's see that if we even need core data or not. Okay, so we will have to use self over here. There we go. Okay, so that's good. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to tell the UI that we have downloaded the image and we want to display the image from the database. So once we have saved the image, we will go ahead and perform dispatch.main.async, and we're going to self.image. We're going to select that image to be photo.content. The image property we can display or create on the top. Perfect. Let's go ahead and build it. Great. Now we can go back to our content view and we can use the photo view model. So I'm just going to go to the content view, create an instance of the photo view model. And whenever you create a button, we are going to say photo view model dot download image, which is going to download a random image. In order to display the image, we are going to go ahead and unwrap the image property, which will be populated by calling download image, which we are doing. And then we will get an actual image, meaning the UI image, which we will be able to do that, like this. Now, if you run this right now, it's not really going to work because there are a couple of things that are missing. Let's go ahead and actually even run this, and you will see that it's not going to be what you were expecting. Let's go ahead and move this into our first screen. There we go. So you can see that we have a download image button. Let's go ahead and click on download image. And so you can see that if I click on the image, it displays different images. So that part is working correctly. But if you look at your console, there are a lot of errors that are going on. And the errors and warnings are basically due to the fact that even though you are saving a transformable object, which is content, your code doesn't really know how to transform back and forth between the data and the UI image and UI image to the data. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's actually a very similar thing we achieved in our previous video when we were saving UI color. So the process is actually very, very similar. I'm going to go ahead and add a new file, and so file is perfectly fine. I will call it UI image and then transformer. There we go. And the UI image transformer will be responsible for transforming between data to the UI image and UI image to the data, which is exactly the same thing that we did when we were using the UI color example. So I'm going to call it UI image transformer, which will be a value transformer. When you are using value transformer, you have to make sure that there are certain functions that you must override. One of those functions is called transform value, and the other one is called the reverse transform value. The transform value is the one that is going to archive the actual image into the data. So let's go ahead and do that. We are going to first get the image. Next, we are going to archive it using the NSKeyed archiver. This is going to allow us to archive it. Make sure that you import UIKit on the top. because we are using UI image. In the reverse transform value, we just have to do the reverse. We will get the data, and then we will use the data to archive it into a different thing. Which different thing would it be? Well, that will be the UI image. So let's go ahead and begin doing that. Let image equals to try ns keyed unarchiver.unarchive object of class, which is UI image.self from data. And now we can go ahead and return the image. If, however, there is a problem, then we can go ahead and catch it and return nil. So now we have a UI image transformer that we have created. We can go ahead and tell the photos model that the content transformable property will be using the UI image transformer. And we can go ahead and add it right over here. But this is not enough. We still have to go to Core Data Manager and tell the Core Data Manager about this new image transformer. So let's go ahead and register that also before creating the NS persistent container. So now we have registered our new value transformer. Let's go ahead and run the application. I'm going to click on download image, and every time I click on download image, you can see that the image is downloading. That error that was happening before is completely gone. We don't get that error anymore. And there we go. Now we have the image being displayed. If you want to display the image when the first time the actual thing was loaded, then meaning the page was loaded, you can also achieve that. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and write the init function, initializer function of the photo view model. We're going to go ahead and create a request, which is nhFetch request of a photo. We will go ahead and create a fetch request based on the entity name, which is also photo, because that's the name of the entity we gave in our photos model. We can go ahead and, if you want, you can use a sort descriptors or anything like that. Now we're going to go ahead and get the photos, which will be of type photo. Let's go ahead and call the context.fetch and passing in the request. If there are items, and especially one and only one item, because we're only storing one item, so first, and we're going to say self.image equals to photo.content. All right. And else we're going to go ahead and say catch print error. So let's go ahead and run this. So we have the image being displayed. Now, if I click on it, we can have different images. I can go ahead and stop it, run it again. You can see that we have that first image that we are getting displayed. And now I can go through different images. All right. Every time I say download image, it actually does download the image and it saves the new image into the database. Again, if I run it again, you'll still see the first image. That was the first image being saved. So basically, every time you click download image, downloads the image, saves the image. So we end up being, anytime I click, it's going to go ahead and download, create a new photo object and save it. So we may end up being like 20, 30, 50 images now actually in the database being saved. And every time I'm clicking, it's actually downloading and saving it in the database. All right. So there you have it. This is how you will store an image in Core Data. If you like this video and want to support my channel, then check out my Udemy courses. I have a lot of different courses on many different aspects of iOS development, including SwiftUI, Swift for intermediate developers, RX Swift, MVVM design pattern, testament development, cookbook course, combined, core data, best-selling courses, async innovate, and many more. Check out the links in the YouTube description. Thank you so much and hope you enjoy these courses.